I still remember the smell of antiseptic in the hospital corridor, and the way my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The doctor stood in front of us, his voice careful, almost apologetic, as if softer words could soften the truth. "There are complications," he said. "You're carrying twins, but the pregnancy cannot continue. We must perform surgery immediately. Twins." The word echoed inside me like a prayer and a heartbreak at the same time. I had known for weeks. Two heartbeats growing inside me, two tiny lives I already loved more than myself. My hands instinctively moved to my stomach, as if I could protect them just by touching. I looked toward my family, waiting for comfort, for reassurance, for someone to tell me I wasn't alone. Instead, I saw discomfort. My mother avoided my eyes. My father's face tightened, not with grief, but worry. My relatives exchanged quick glances, whispering under their breath. No one asked how I felt. No one held my hand. "Twins," my aunt murmured, "that's a lot." A lot. My heart sank as if I were falling into something dark and endless. The doctor continued explaining the risks, but my family had already made up their minds. They weren't listening to medical terms, they were calculating costs, responsibilities, futures they didn't want to imagine. My father cleared his throat. "Doctor, just do what's necessary. Don't complicate things. Save her." His words felt sharp, like a blade pressed gently but firmly against my chest. "And the babies?" I whispered. No one answered. My husband stood there, silent, his eyes on the floor. I waited for him to speak, for him to fight for us. But silence filled the room, heavier than any argument. "They weren't meant to be," my mother said quietly, as if that settled everything. "Allah knows best." Maybe he did, but in that moment I felt like even Allah was closer to me than my own family. As the nurses prepared to wheel me away, I realized something terrifying. My children had already been abandoned, even before they were gone. They weren't mourned, they weren't prayed for. They were seen as a problem that solved itself. Tears slid silently into my hair as I was taken toward the operating room. I whispered apologies to the tiny souls inside me, promising them love in a world that had already refused them. That day, lying beneath cold hospital lights, I learned a painful truth. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come with anger or shouting. Sometimes it comes quietly from the people you trusted most. The surgery room lights were blinding, but nothing hurt more than the emptiness inside my chest. As the anesthesia slowly pulled me into darkness, my thoughts clung to the tiny heartbeats I would never hear again. I begged Allah silently to take care of my babies wherever they were going, because no one else seemed to want them. When I woke up, my body felt heavy, numb, and unfamiliar. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No prayers being whispered, no familiar voices, no warm hands waiting to tell me everything would be okay. I turned my head weakly, expecting to see my mother. Instead, I saw an empty chair. Hours passed in slow, painful stretches. Nurses came and went, checking my vitals, adjusting machines, offering soft smiles filled with pity. Each time the door opened, my heart lifted for a second only to fall again. My family never came. My phone lay untouched on the side table. No missed calls, no messages. It was as if my pain had been neatly erased along with my unborn children. Tears rolled silently down my temples, soaking into the pillow. I didn't cry loudly. I didn't have the strength. Grief sat inside me like a quiet ache, steady and suffocating. Just as the sky outside the window began to fade into evening, the door opened again. This time, the steps were different, hesitant, rushed, human. My husband's mother stood at the doorway, her breath uneven, her dupatta slipping from her head. Her eyes found mine instantly, and they filled with tears she didn't try to hide. "My child," she whispered, crossing the room in quick steps. She took my hand carefully, as if afraid she might hurt me. Her grip tightened, warm and real. "I'm so sorry." Those 4 words broke me. I cried the way I hadn't been able to cry before. Deep, shaking sobs that came from somewhere buried inside my soul. She pulled my hand to her forehead, her shoulders trembling as she cried with me, not for herself, but for my loss. They were my grandchildren. She said softly, "And you are my daughter. No one gets to leave you alone like this." She stayed. She didn't ask questions. She didn't offer hollow comfort. She just stayed, feeding me spoon by spoon, adjusting my pillow, reciting quiet duas for my babies. That night, while the world outside slept, she sat beside my bed, guarding my broken heart. And in that quiet hospital room, I realized something I would never forget. Sometimes the people who choose you become more family than the ones you were born into. I returned home with a body that was healing and a heart that wasn't. The house looked the same, but I wasn't. Every corner carried memories of the children I had imagined, 2 cradles I would never buy, 2 names I would never speak aloud. My family behaved as if nothing had happened. My mother talked about daily chores, my aunt discussed distant relatives, and my father focused on finances. Not once did anyone mention the surgery. Not once did they ask how I was coping. Their silence felt intentional, as if acknowledging my pain would force them to face their own cruelty. I stopped trying to be understood. Days passed quietly until my husband's mother called for a family gathering. Her voice on the phone was calm, but there was something firm beneath it, something that told me this time would be different. Everyone sat in the living room, polite smiles carefully in place. I sat beside her, my hands folded in my lap, my heart racing. For years, I had been taught that respect meant staying quiet. That day, I learned respect could also mean standing up. She nearly lost her life. My mother-in-law began, her gaze moving slowly across the room, and she lost her children. The room went uncomfortably still. My father cleared his throat. It was Allah's will. These things happen. Yes, she replied evenly, but abandonment is a choice. Her words struck like controlled thunder. You discussed money while she was bleeding. She continued. You turned away while she was being taken into surgery. You left her alone. My aunt shifted uncomfortably. My mother stared at the floor. We did what we thought was practical. My father said, his voice defensive. She stood up then, her presence filling the room. Practical would have been holding her hand. Practical would have been praying for her babies. Children are not expenses. They are blessings. No one spoke. She turned to me, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. This woman showed strength none of you had. She endured loss without support, and she survived. For the first time, I didn't feel small. This is not about anger, she continued. This is about accountability. If you cannot honor her pain, you do not get access to her life. The message was clear. That evening, my family finally looked at me, not as a responsibility, not as a problem, but as someone who had been deeply wronged. And I realized something important. Sometimes healing doesn't begin with forgiveness. Sometimes it begins when the truth is finally spoken aloud. Life did not change overnight, but something inside me did. After that evening, I stopped waiting for apologies that might never come. I stopped explaining my pain to people who had already decided it was inconvenient. Healing became a private journey, slow, uneven, but real. My husband changed in ways I hadn't expected. Guilt sat heavily on his shoulders. He learned too late that silence can wound deeper than harsh words. He began standing beside me, not behind me, and though the damage couldn't be undone, effort slowly replaced regret. My family tried to return to normal. They called more often. They asked polite questions, but something had shifted permanently. Their voices no longer carried power over me. One afternoon, my mother asked softly, Why have you become so distant? I looked at her, calm but steady. Because I learned how to survive without being seen. The words weren't spoken in anger, they were spoken in truth. I focused on myself, on rest, on prayer, on rebuilding a sense of worth that had been quietly taken from me for years. My mother-in-law became my safe place. She never pushed me to forgive. She never rushed my grief. She simply reminded me every day that I mattered. Months later, when my family gathered again, I didn't sit silently in the corner. I didn't seek approval. I carried myself differently, stronger, lighter, unafraid. I don't hold hatred in my heart. I told them gently, but I will not allow my pain to be dismissed again. No one argued. That was my revenge, not loud accusations, not broken relationships, but boundaries drawn with grace. My family learned that access to me was no longer automatic. Respect had become the entry fee, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for protecting myself. At night, I sometimes thought of my twins. I imagined them as light, brief, beautiful, and purposeful. They had come into my life for only a moment, but they had changed everything. They taught me that love without dignity is not love at all. They taught me that strength can be gentle, and they taught me that sometimes the greatest victory is choosing yourself. I lost my children, but I found my voice, and that voice, quiet, firm, unbreakable, became the beginning of a life no one could ever silence again.